Hi, my name is Jason Gilam with Secure Ideas, and I'm going to be presenting Building a Better Grid. So this is a framework that I'm proposing for measuring the content security policy effectiveness. And this presentation is being done for Bsides Charlotte 2026. Um, and I'll get on to the next page here. Who am I? For those who have never met me in the Charlotte area, my name is Jason Gilam, and I am the CIO of Secure Ideas. Secure Ideas is a pen testing firm. That is primarily what we do, but we also do a lot of other cool things because we're really just a big bunch of nerds. And I'm in addition to that, I'm an IONS faculty member. IONS is an organization that pairs up their clients who are seeking expertise in various areas with experts to answer their various different questions that come up. I am also an OWASP project committee member, which is part of my interest, I guess, in coming in with this specific type of talk, right, where I'm talking about an application security control. And other than that, I've been hacking things for a long time, programming for even longer, and I have a variety of different interests, but all of which are in various different ways somewhat nerdy. I know that I have my business strategy on there. It probably doesn't seem like that is there, but I guarantee for those of you who are in the tech world who have not looked at business before, it can get pretty nerdy once you get in there. Okay, so let's start with what is CSP, or Content Security Policy. So what this is a control, a security control that is actually built into all modern browsers, and it takes the form of a response header. So when you look at the raw request and response traffic that you get in a browser for the various different requests that are being made by an application, some parts of that response may contain a header that's called the content security policy, and it will have a list of directives on it. This is a very simple example on this slide where you see script source is self, frame ancestors none, form action self. Okay. There are a lot more directives than this, and that's one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit and why this project makes a lot of sense. Um, but those are some of the basics. So some of the key capabilities of the content security policy, one of the most well-known ones in the application security world is script sources, right? So what this does is it controls which JavaScript is permitted to run within the browser for that website. So that can be a very powerful tool, especially if you start thinking about cross-site scripting attacks, where it's the attacker is attempting to inject their own scripts into an application. A properly formed content security policy would prevent those scripts from running. Okay, they still might be injected, but they won't actually run because the browser will actually stop it. Other types of controls that are there, there's a whole set of controls around form actions. So you know when you go to a website and it says fill out this form and then you press a button and it submits that form, the form action is where you're submitting that form to. Okay, so that is something that can actually be controlled again through the content security policy, thus preventing an attacker from injecting their own target for forms to be submitted to. That is a kind of a twist on the cross-site scripting attack, because if they're able to control the form destination, they don't even need an attacker doesn't even need to have a the ability to run scripts at that point in your application in order to do something such as capture the username and password that's logged in through a form. Then there is frame controls. So a lot of websites will use frames to bring up either other information or parts of the same application, or sometimes they are used to embed information from other applications. And then they're also used for a variety of different web application tricks as well on the development side. So one of the things that we can do, frames are, by the way, they are used for a series of attacks, category of attacks that are in the field of um, clickjacking, right? Where you basically stack various different elements in front of each other, and when a user goes to click on let's say a button that looks innocuous on your website, they're actually clicking through into a frame to something else. So it's that things of that nature are the types of attacks that are used there. And with again a content security policy and the right directives on there, you can prevent this type of attack altogether, right? It controls where frames are allowed to open from the website. And then finally, we have a variety of different directives for where to load various resources from, such as your images and your fonts and your styles and even media on there as well. Okay. So what I would like to propose, and the reason why I think this is important is because the way that we treat the content security policy in our when we're analyzing or testing the security of an application, the way we treat it is not very good. Okay, it's definitely not on par with something that we're more familiar with testing, which is, let's say, a firewall or a set of firewall rules. So if we're doing a test inside of a network and we know that there's supposed to be a firewall there, what we do is there's a lot of questions that we might ask ourselves, like, and just think, bear with me for a second, but just think, for example, you have a sensitive network inside of your system, like a cardholder data environment, CDE, for those of you who are in PCI, or a similar set aside network for sensitive data, maybe it's for healthcare or whatever. Okay, and then you have a security control that's dividing that subnet from the rest of your network. What are some of the things that you're going to be asking yourself? Well, first of all, is the firewall there? Yes, okay, it is. But you don't just stop there. What you want to know is it actually doing its job? What traffic is it blocking? Are the rules set up correctly, or is it allowing certain types of potentially malicious traffic through? Um, is it doing proper blocking of ingress and egress of traffic, right? So does it allow sensitive information out through potentially the wrong channels? Okay, so there's a lot of things that can be tested in firewalls, and quite often during an audit or an assessment or a pen test of a network where there is supposed to be a firewall, we spend some time scrutinizing that. But when we look at a content security policy, this is treated as, oh, it's just another control, but nobody really uses it. And very often, what we see is in any sort of audit, and part of this may just be because people don't really understand the content security policy, but they just say, hey, do you have one? And, oh, yeah, you do. Okay, you're done. Maybe we'll ask, does it have unsafe inline or some sort of directive in there that's known to be bad? But that's pretty much as far as it goes, right? We don't really scrutinize the content security policy very closely. And so the result is we have a control that is there that is not used well. And last year I did a talk where I had actually scraped a bunch of data off the internet. I looked at a whole bunch of content security policies. I took something called the Tranquil list, and it has 1 million domains in it. Now, I wasn't able to get pull back web content from all 1 million domains because a lot of those domains are used for other things, but I was able to pull data back for a very large number of them. Let's just say around 3/4 of them. And of those, I found that, and I recently redid this just a couple weeks ago, and the numbers really haven't changed much. So about 80% of what's out there doesn't have any content security policy. And then about almost 20% has a content security policy, and then there's a couple of other modes on there too. Report only mode, which is maybe somebody who's looking into doing one or assessing one or something like that. So, but the point is that really only 20% of the internet even uses the control at all. Now, of that 20%, if you look at the breakdown of that, you have a very large percentage of that. So that 20%, that's kind of the orange, yellow, and green on the end here. And what you see, and also actually, sorry, part of the red on here as well. So this graph is a little bit maybe seem a little bit odd because it doesn't really fit with the previous slide perfectly. But when I say no meaningful protection, what I mean by that is it either doesn't have a content security policy or it has a content security policy that doesn't do anything. Okay. Whereas on the previous slide, I was talking about no policy even stated. So in this one here, of the policy of all of those same websites that I looked at, 82.2% have a content security policy on there that that is completely ineffective. So it's either doing, it doesn't have one at all, or it has one but it doesn't do anything. And then around 17% of all of the websites out there have a content security policy, but it's very, very minimal. It's only using a fraction of the available directives, and so it's not actually fully blocking stuff, including a lot of things that it probably could turn on, but it's not. And then we have the remainder. So as you can see on here, of all the websites out there that I tested, we're looking at less than 0.5% that are in the sort of moderate, so they actually provide some protection. So they're doing relatively well compared to everybody else, and then a very small percentage actually have strong protection built into their content security policy. And that's really the state of what we're looking at right now, right? I'd like to see these numbers change. And so if I look at, where are the directives actually being used, what we see is, so I have these 6 different main categories of directives that I look at, and frame embedding is the one that's used the most. Okay, which is a little bit weird because I would have thought that script execution would be the one we look at most, because in information security that's what we do. But apparently what's happened is clickjacking is apparently a more focused control, and maybe because it's taken the place of an existing control that people used to use very often called X-frame options. So using a content security policy is the new way of doing that. And for some reason that is taken off as the one thing that people actually do. So then you have a style injection on there and object and plugin injection at 15% of what's in there. So if you think of the content security policy as similar to a firewall control, and what I mean by this is an extra control. You already have, you have other things. Like when you have a device sitting on a network, it should have services that you don't need are turned off. The services that are there still have auth controls on them, right? But that doesn't mean you don't need the firewall. You still need the firewall because this plays into the principle of defense in depth, right? Now for websites, we have a control, the content security policy, but we're only configuring some of its rules, right? We're skipping over a whole bunch of things that it's capable of doing, and we don't turn them all on. So it's basically become a checkbox, right? We're looking for a few things about it, but we're not taking into effect a whole bunch of other things. So in the green box on this slide, you can see I have this is what typically happens if somebody is running some sort of scanner that does a content security policy check. Okay. Now this said, I know that Google has content security policy tool for verifying them, but its focus is entirely on the script access aspects rather. Still doesn't look at these other aspects of the content security policy, right? So it's not looking at form actions or frame ancestors or the base URI. A lot of those other things are just not really covered in there, and they should be. So what I am proposing is an index, okay, a way of measuring the quality of a content security policy, and to basically give some determination as to how much residual risk is it leaving there by not covering all of the things that it should be covering or not covering them as well as it should. And what I wanted to do was come up with a scale and a way of measuring a content security policy that could be fully autonomous, right? So you basically could build a rule engine around this to do automatic scanning. I know that's going to that will make some aspects a little bit more difficult because there are subjective or maybe aspects that might require more analysis to get a very accurate feel for how quote unquote secure it is. But I don't think that's the point. What I really want to do is I want to put something together here that's an easy measurement and gives a relative score in a way that promotes actually using content security policies to reduce risk in web applications. Okay, so let's go beyond just checking a box and get into some form of a measurement. That's what I'm proposing. And so the way that I would like to do that is a weighted six-dimensional. I'm starting with six-dimensional. I may expand it later on in a version 2, but let's start with script execution being the most weighted. Those percentages are the weights that I'm planning on giving. But having script injection weighted probably at about a third, and objects, frames, and forms at around 15%. The base URI, because it's a harder one to attack in the first place, and it's really just does one thing. So we'll put that one a little bit lower at a 10, and then style injection also at 10, and all of these things we can do some level of measurement on them in order to get a numerical score out of it, right? And so what I was thinking we would do is have a scoring between, let's just call for now on the scale 0 as perfect. You're doing the best you possibly can for that directive for the content security policy, and 1 being you don't have it, right? You skipped it. And so with a simple bit of math, we can get ourselves to a point where you can calculate across those 6 different categories I showed previously, and then this sort of scoring range here to come up with some actual scores. And here's one example. So this would be a checkbox content security policy. So in this case here, we said default source is self. That's actually not bad to have that. That's it's better than not having anything at all, or having a default source of that's a star wide open or something like that. But it does have unsafe inline, unsafe eval, and it looks like I got cut off here on the end. But anyway, if you looked at how something like this might be scored, you're missing the so for the script execution, it's not very good. So that's going to score pretty high, but it's not a 1, right? It's below a 1, so that's better than a 1. And then we have the object plugin, frame embedding, form, actions, base URI. All of those are missing, right? So those are going to be all 1s, and based on their weighting, that's going to add 1.5 points for each. And then the style injection, that's probably what the part that got cut off there, is present but not done that well either. So that's going to add another 0.8 points. So then you end up with a score overall of quality on this one of just under 9. Okay. And then here's an example of, we'll call this a gold standard where things are done a lot better. And we have script execution at that's it's using nonces on here that with the random on there you would fill that in strict dynamic, and I won't get into specifically what all of these do right now, but that is a recommended approach for handling scripts. And then the object source is none, which means you can't put object tags into the website, they just won't work. Frame ancestor, same thing. Form actions can only submit forms to itself, and there's no changing of the base URI. And so putting all of this together, we've now put directives in several of these places. In most cases, the directives are set to the some of the better settings out there, and so we end up with a score of 1.8, which is nice and low. That shows a much lower level of risk than the previous one. And so through this lens, what this would tell us is that if we were to look at the same data that I had out previously, we're at 0.34% of websites would actually fall in that, somewhere between 1 and 2.5 of that low risk, and the vast majority fall into a number that's over 8.5, right? So that's 82.2%, or is over 8.5, and then also, actually you could look at everything above 6.5 and say that's almost everybody. So it's somewhere around 3% actually fall below a 5 point on this scale. And my hope would be is by putting this out there, having a way to measure, we could get folks to actually use a measurement in order to push developers to make better use of the content security policy. Okay. For those that do have or are enforcing content security policy, this just gives another a view of that data as well. So I just wanted to throw that out there for some more specific numbers on things that are defined there. So with that said, I am looking for feedback on this index idea. It is in its infancy in terms of like defining how we're going to do the measuring on it. So I would really like some folks to read through and give me some feedback on it, and let me know, are there aspects that you're like, hey, maybe we should actually add this other directive into the measurement, or the weighting doesn't seem right, or maybe just asking questions about different parts of it. So if you could, if this is something that you're interested in, if application security is something that you've studied, then please give me your feedback on the proposal. It's in my GitHub. So github.com/jgilam, GILLAM/CSP-index. So if you could take a look at that, please let me know, and thank you very much for listening to my talk. I much appreciate it.